The ways in. How did I get here?
My first degree was in performing arts, and I went into it because my background was in music and drama. But when I got to university, I also had to do dance, which was my least favourite subject, because my dance teacher didn't quite know what to do with me, so she would sit me off to the side and say, "You just make up your own version." Little did I know that I would start choreography so early.
I started out life as a pianist. I trained in piano from when I was about 8. I sort of played around before that, always improvised, messed around. And then I trained in piano for a while, had lessons and stuff like that, and played a lot in concerts and things like that from a young age. But then I was a teenager and I discovered singing, and I realised that I actually liked that a lot more.
I acquired my disability when I was 20, so I had a very traditional dance training and route into the profession. I moved away from home, from a small country town in country New South Wales, Australia, to Melbourne at the age of 11 to study dance. So I was very fortunate to have a dance and academic training in one college at a very young age that very much cropped me for a career in dance.
I trained to be a singer initially, and that was quite a specific, determined sort of goal that I was aiming for. Because I began to realise that I had this kind of physicality, this strength in my upper body that was generated by using crutches, again, since the age of 14, I began to train in aerial work and use the upper body strength that I already had in that way. And it was from working with an aerial that took me into dance and meeting choreographers, which was never ever an intention at all. It was an absolute accident.
I lived in Singapore and I was working with a deaf theatre there for 8 years. And I felt I needed more training, more studying. So I was thinking what I could go and do. So then I decided I would go to Liverpool, to the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts. I studied there for 3 years. When I was there, I was also involved with different companies round about the area. And then my wife wanted to move to Scotland, and I thought, okay, well, you know, I had to follow her and do as I was told.
What were my key moments?
I think one of the important things for me was having training and good, excellent training, which I think in Australia I was very lucky to have. But to be able to develop skills as a dancer and the training and technique that's needed as a dancer is really important. And these days, you need to be so versatile in all different styles of dance. So I think it's really important that training is the key to growth, I suppose, as a dancer.
The key moments in my career, as it were, in my artistic journey, have been primarily 2004, when I applied for the role of narrator in Threepenny Opera. And when I got that was really the time when I realised that actually I could do theatre, and I could do music in theatre, and I could do, to some degree, work as a music leader. I still feel that I've got a way to go with that, but certainly I think, you know, that really was the turn. It was the key moment in my life that changed everything, pretty much.
I had been searching for a solo performance, and I found a book. It was a fantastic book, and its name was Mistero Buffo. And it was an amazing solo piece where I could change characters, and a judge from the National Students' Drama Festival had came to see the show, and he thought, wow, and they invited me to go along to this festival. And I was the only deaf person to be invited. The rest were all hearing, so I was a wee bit nervous about that. I mean, it was a fantastic time. And they didn't look at me as being deaf or being any different. That was both deaf and hearing were equal within that setting. And the hearing audience, we sat and got feedback from them, and it was very open for questions. You know, they didn't focus on me being deaf. They focused on the art form, and I felt really equal, and I felt that was really important for me at that time.
I worked with a choreographer in England who was an American choreographer called Jess Curtis. When I met a dance company called Blue Eyed Soul Dance Company, and Jess it was just one of those real road to Damascus moments. Everything changed. He introduced me to movement in such a way that just made me so fascinated by my own potential, and not as a kind of comparison to how other people moved, but how I naturally moved. And it created a real fascination for me in the crutches, but with the crutches as tools for movement. And that began to lead to me making my own work.
What obstacles were in my way?
One of the biggest challenges is still trying to battle that stereotypic view of what a dancer is, and knowing that I'm not a traditionally built dancer. I'm not necessarily the image that comes to mind when you think of a dancer. And so I think there's that I come up against on an ongoing basis. But I do feel like that's gradually changing, and I feel like people's minds and opinions are being opened with regard to who can dance, and realising that dance actually is for everyone.
Here in Scotland, there is no deaf theatre, nothing at all, absolutely nothing. And that really opened my eyes. In Europe, well, I've been to loads and loads of places, loads of things developing, 25 years ago, but here in Scotland, now still, there's nothing. So I felt then there's no training for deaf people. There's no training for performance development for deaf people. There is no networking for deaf people.
You see media or press that's been put together that was out of your hands, and the terminology or the language that's been used is really not what I would want to be associated with, or it's what you've been consciously trying to work against and change, you know.
I would say there's a lot of angst in my career, that I've always felt that I have been put into this leadership position, maybe a little bit prematurely, when I haven't developed myself, i.e., you know, working as a musical director when you're absolutely scared to death is great, because it does make you branch out and it does make you do things. But I think in an ideal situation, perhaps with more training from the beginning, I may not have felt so out of my depth.
How can we succeed in the arts world?
Training. And I keep going on about this and it's boring me, but ultimately, training. That is the most important thing. And experience. You know, there's people who are disabled artists that sort of getting involved with it who have never really, or have very little experience of art in early life, and who have come to it in later life. And I think all of us could benefit from having had the experience of maybe doing youth theatre or Amdram, or, you know, music from a young age and things like that. And I think the more that you can get to that at the same age as your non-disabled counterparts, the better. I think that's essential.
I think a critical sort of discussion about the work and a critical eye to the work. I think peer pressure is a very vital part, actually, nowadays, of other disabled artists.
If you want to produce a high quality of work, you have to work in conjunction with other people. We don't want people, you know, that, oh, you're deaf and being patronised, or you're disabled and accept a lower quality of work. We can't patronise people. We want it to be professional, develop professional training and produce a good quality of work, a high quality of work.
One, access to training. Two, people's perceptions changed in regards to people who are leading these arts organisations and education facilities. And three, more opportunities in mainstream dance and arts world for people with disabilities to really present their work. Because I feel like you know, what makes art so rich is the diversity of art, and I think disabled artists bring such richness and such unique perspective to it, and I think it has a lot to offer the arts world, just if the rest of the arts in the mainstream world would just be open to receiving.
What now?
There has been a wave of, I guess, very recently, a wave of disabled professional artists coming through. Myself, Mark, Caroline, Robert Gale, etc. In Scotland, particularly Sally. All the, you know, there is a band of people of a kind of similar age as well that have come through and been supported, and there has been, you know, that has been due to kind of a huge amount of awareness and support from the funding agencies and from the big organisations, from Creative Scotland, NTS, all these FST, all these organisations very clearly making a shift in attitude. And I think what's the big worry for us when we talk amongst ourselves is that it doesn't drop. Because I think that's happened in the past when you've seen, like, years ago when Grey Eye were first formed and Nabil Shaban and that Matt Fraser, etc., and that sort of generation of disabled artists came out and they made quite an impact and they got so far. And supporting that was very trendy and fun, you know, funding trendy for a while, and then it drops, and then for a generation, and then you get like this generation coming through, and the big fear is that it drops again, and somebody else has to reinvent the wheel in another 2 generations. And it's that thing of not wanting people to have to make the same mistakes again.
There needs to be role models so the younger generation can actually see that this is possible. I never forget when I was performing 2 years ago with the National Theatre of Scotland, and I was choreographed 2 works that we were touring around regional highlands in northern Scotland, and we went to this small little village, and there was a young person in the audience watching the show, and then afterwards she came up to speak to me. She used a wheelchair, and she came up and said, "Wow, I didn't think it was possible, but I just saw what you did, and now I realised I can be an actor too." And it's just like, yeah, you can.
You have to see it to know that it's a possibility for you. If you're not seeing anyone that you can relate to, then it doesn't occur to you that it's something you could do yourself. So it's that thing of trying to hit both sides at the same time. You have to create a big public presence, but you have to also start creating these sort of very, very foundation level access to people, you know.
Involvement with disabled people in mainstream theatre and music and art is in general. More training, so definitely, you know, more provision of training at all levels, better access to the arts, and I would say less talking and more doing.
My ambition is that we're a much more united front, that we're more collaborative in our approaches, that we are better connected, that we're communicating better with each other, that we're sharing and learning from each other, and that, I think, is what is going to allow us to make greater impact.